Okay, so you've chosen the character project, this little pirate fish guy. So we've already kind of looked at in previous videos how to set up the image planes for this, even how to create this stand-in cutout guy. And then now, once we have those things set up, it's time for us to start looking at how we can start actually modeling this thing out. We've already looked at how we can do some proxy modeling. My suggestion is to get something in proxy format as soon as possible. And we're going to be taking a look at a form of modeling called box modeling. The reason they call it box modeling is because we start off with a box or a cube, and we push it out from there and add geometry to it to build up a final shape. So you guys have already seen how to create some different primitives and things like that, that we're under the polygon menu subset, and that we also have this shelf set up here that's got a bunch of different primitives. So it's possible that we can create them this way, or we can go to create polygon primitives. I don't have the interactive creation turned on. Go to cube, option box, and then we can set the parameters for how we create this cube. I'm just going to reset the settings, so it's just going to give us the default, and I'll go ahead and hit apply. So that's going to give us the cube right down on the bottom. And then now I'm going to take that and move this up. I'm going to start turning this into the head of the creature. So we've also looked at working in this quad view that you see here. So we've got a top, front, side view. And so I'm just going to go to the side view and push this cube here, scale it up to where it starts to roughly match the size of the head, like that. And then we've got this from the side view, and then from the front view, everything's going to be okay for that. Now what we can do with this cube, we've already looked at these things as well with the primitives. We can interactively change this value by clicking it and middle mouse dragging left or right. And so I just want to split right down the middle of this thing, because I'm going to delete half of it and give a negative scale for that. And then I want one division through the depth of this, like this. And we might as well do one through the height. Okay, so now we're going to delete half the side of that. Remember, just hit F11 to go into your face selection mode, select your faces, and delete that. And then I'll tap F8, and we've got history on there. I'm going to delete the history. And we want to freeze the transformations, get our pivot down to the center down here. So we're going to go modify freeze transformations, and I'm going to make sure it's freezing translation, rotation, and scale. Hit apply, and I'm going to go to modify reset transformations, and it's going to put my pivot point down there at the center. We've also looked at how we can hand move those things, but we're not going to be too worried about that right now. Okay, so we can give it a name. We can name it over here. We can call this left head, something like that. Or we can go to the outliner, Windows outliner, and we could rename it there if we want. So it's up to you however you want to do that. I usually put the underscore L at the end of it, then it's easy just to copy that and then change the extension later if I want to designate that as right. So I'll just select this model, and I'll go Edit, Duplicate Special, Option Box, and we'll do an instance. So let's just reset the settings on this. We're going to do an instance because we want to make sure anything we do on this side automatically happens on this side, and we'll give it a negative scale on X. So you can see here, here's the manipulator. This is the axis for X, -1. And I need to make sure my number lock is turned on my computer so it recognizes those keystrokes like that. Hit apply. And here's my negative copy. So I don't think, I don't know, I might keep the bottom of this. I was going to say I could delete the bottom of this and have the beginning of a neck, but we'll kind of work with this for a little bit and kind of see. So I know we just have a cube, but let's go ahead and right click and say vertex, and we'll move these things, and we'll get as close as we can very quickly with the shape of this, just with these few points that we do have. So maybe this represents this part of the jaw here, and maybe this is this part of the head. And the neck is coming up in here. Maybe we've got this going on here. Okay, so here's this beginning of this shape, right? Very quickly we're able to do that. Now we can take these points and we can start to move them in a little bit. Make sure it's not just a complete and total box. And we can go here. If it helps, you can look at this with all the views all at the same time. So we've got some black shading again. So again, I think this is a bug, but just in case, we've got to turn on two-sided lighting for everything. So we'll go under lighting on here and say two-sided lighting. Make sure that's on for everything. And the other thing is, if you're getting any kind of dark shading, I did notice that if I take the instance, the side that maybe is having some problems drawing correctly, just hide it and then bring it back. So Control H to hide and Shift H to bring it back. So again, I think that's probably not going to be an issue whenever you're using it. Just happens to be something that I'm considering a bug right now. So you can see I'm in this perspective view, but I'm moving here and I can kind of evaluate things a bit better whenever I have all these different views open like this. Here's something else to note, that you know, we've got these drawings from the front and the side, and I said in earlier videos, a concept artist is not going to be able to draw in perfect 3D and everything's going to just match up perfectly. It's going to be a best estimate. So usually if I'm doing characters or portraits and things like that, usually the front view is the more important view to kind of pay attention to. Now, the proxy objects that you saw that we did before, like the fish, is more of a side view and there's more information coming from that. And then the proxy object we did for the ship was a side view and more of the information was coming from that. So you got to determine which view is probably going to be the most accurate for what it is that you're trying to build. So you can see from this front view, this point here is going up past the drawing, so that's not good. I need to pull that down to about roughly there, and I can pull this point down here, and then now I can go to the side view here and maybe pull that out just a little bit right in here, and I got to pull that down. Okay, so again, why we call this the box modeling is because we started off with a box, and we're just going to start tweaking that and getting overall shape for things. And so you can see, as I got this flat point here, if I pull this thing down, we can start to round a shape. And if it helps you, turn on the wireframe on shaded like that, or you can go under show shading, sorry, wireframe on shaded, or you can use the icon. It's up to you. But you can see how we're starting to build curvature here. We have to have enough geometry to be able to do so. So there is starting to be some curvature, but you know, we don't have very many polys that we're working with right now currently. So to build higher degrees of curvature, you need more geometry to be able to do that. So I'll select this point, but it's best to work in a low format first and then build up your polygons as needed. Because you can see it didn't take me too much time to get a shape that's roughed out like this. Now that I have this working, I can go ahead and add a split going down through here, and that's going to give me more geometry to work with. So in the earlier videos, we looked at how we can add a split to this. There's different ways of doing it. So for an object mode, if we shift right click, we can use this insert edge loop tool, and you can just click and drag and add an edge loop like that, and that's going to give us that more geometry to work with. So I'll put a little more geo here and here, and you just let go and it completes the tool for you. So that's one way. The other way is just select an edge, right click, say edge, select it, and then control right click instead of shift right click. Control right click over it, and we can say edge ring utilities to edge ring and split. Now the cool thing about this one is that you've got this thing over here in the channel box, and you can select it and middle mouse drag. If it goes really fast, you can hold down control while you're middle mouse dragging. This one will let you be you know, more accurate with a number, so you can type in a number if you wanted. So maybe that's what the advantage of that one would be for you. So there's just two different methods, but I think if you're just doing a character, you're probably going to want to use F8, shift right click, and say insert edge loop tool. I think that one will be probably the one that you're looking for. Okay, so we've added this new geo. Now we need to do something with it. So anytime you add new geometry, there should be a reason why you're doing so. If you don't really need to build up curvature, it's probably a good idea to not add that geometry. You're just making a little bit more work for yourself. Now there are times later on where you want to have a nice evenly distributed kind of model as far as how many polys are throughout the whole thing. So you can see this polygon is roughly about the same size as this, so they're all pretty close, but these are bigger, so that could be an issue, especially if you're going to some program like ZBrush and you're sculpting on your model. But we're not too concerned about that right now. We're doing more of the proxy version that will get pushed into the final game version for us. So you can see how I'm trying to just use this drawing as guidance for myself to build this shape out. And obviously, as you have more geometry to work with, you're going to be able to be more accurate with the shapes that you're creating, like this. Okay, so this works pretty good. I'm going to go into the perspective view. So here's something else to note. As a 3D modeler in the computer, we don't have true depth perception or anything else like that. We're always looking at a two-dimensional version of a three-dimensional object that only exists inside the computer. So the only thing that we can really do to help us in this situation is to continuously spin around the model as we model these things. So don't stay in one view too long. So like I could sit here and tweak these verts and everything looks pretty good from this viewpoint, and then I go over here and then I notice it's probably a little bit too high. So what I usually do is make some kind of alteration and make some kind of change, and then I spin the model around immediately after doing that. So you can see I'm constantly kind of just working my way around as I create things, and that helps me understand the just how 3D this thing actually is. My manipulator's kind of small. That's this little thing here. If you want it to be larger, I can show you where the preferences are for that real quick. So we'll go to Windows, Setting Preferences, and we'll go to Preferences. And mine is off screen, so I'm going to do Windows up arrow key just to bring that into focus. And let's go to Manipulators that you see right here, and you can see this global scale. I think I personally like it at set to 2, but it's up to you to kind of see what works well for you. And then if you're happy with that, you can hit save. So anytime you might want to change that, that's where that stuff sits. So I'm going to kind of round this out. Let's go to the front view because I need to get some more information for this now at this point. And so I'll be working in perspective along with the this front view. And now that I got this new geo, I can start pulling these points in a bit, and you can see how I'm building curvature this way, like that. And got to kind of imagine back here in the back. The drawing doesn't necessarily help me with that, but I got to kind of imagine as this thing goes back in space, does it taper in a bit more and pull in? Okay, so I definitely missing this ridge for this eyebrow, and we'll get that in there, but let's keep going with this thing. So we've got this back part of the model, and we need more of a neck. So we can just select those faces, and then we can shift right click and say extrude face. And again, we could push out with this like this, but if we're worried about it not moving so correctly, we can move in world space like that. And I'm going to push back just to give myself some new geometry to work with, and I can click that outer ring and do rotate. And just try not to rotate. I was trying to scale this thing down slightly, so I might have to go to a different view and then just move it down a little bit like this, and I'll rotate it a little bit more. Hit the W key to put it on move, and I'll hit G for my last command so I can extrude another version of this out like that. And this time I'm going to rotate it down. Got to put it on this version. Rotate it down to where it's almost flat like that. Okay, so that's giving me some geo for that there. Remember, if we've got a left and a right side like this, I'm just going to delete history real quick. I'm going to hide this part, Control H. And anytime we do that extrusion, we got to be careful that we're producing these faces on the inside. So I'll just select them and get rid of them like that. And I didn't realize I had those selected. So I'll just hold down Shift and click on those to get rid of that as a selection. Hit backspace. And now I'm getting a lot closer. So I'm going to take these two verts and weld them together to get this to become one point. So I'll select this vert, hold down Shift, select this one, and then Shift right click, merge vertices, merge to center. So I'll drag a marquee over these two, Shift, right click, merge vertices, merge to center. Okay. And now I can keep tweaking on this shape. I'm going to guess that this is going to kind of taper in a bit more as it goes back like that. But this could be, if we think about this head sitting on top of some shoulders, this might be the main part of the head. This is kind of the neck going out, but then there are going to be these kind of muscles back here. These are your trapezius muscles, and they attach to the back of your neck at the bottom of your head and kind of travel down to your shoulders and run down through your back. So we had to have something that kind of represents that. So maybe this stuff kind of comes out a little bit like this in this area. Maybe this comes out here, here. And what I can do is check this from the front and kind of see what kind of shape am I producing at that point. So you see it probably needs to come out even further because his head comes out a bit further in the drawing. And again, I'm going more by the information from the front view. So I need some point here. This is the bottom of his jaw, needs to stick out roughly about here. This is the bottom part of his neck. This comes down to about there. And this part of his head is sticking out, feels like it's sticking out far enough, maybe about roughly there, and here. And then maybe I can rearrange some of these points too, just because I think this would kind of travel more like that shape going up around the shoulders. So we're going to push this a little bit. So I know right now at this stage, this is why you want to kind of work low. You can see I'm really having to actually move a lot of these verts by hand right now and do each one individually. So that does become time consuming. So there are different ways of modeling. This is, like I said, this is box modeling. There are methods now where people just go into a digital sculpting program like ZBrush and then rough out these shapes and just actually sculpt what the thing is, and then later on kind of build out the shape. But since we're going over fundamental things, that's getting a bit more advanced, so that's why we're learning how to do this box modeling. So I got this here, this point on the jaw, this point here. It looks like it's getting better. So I don't think I need these faces down here along the bottom, because like I said, I just don't think those are actually helping us in any kind of way. I know it's extending out for the body, but if we need to grow those out, we can just select the edges and grow those out. Because I want to imagine, where does the neckline kind of end? For this thing. So I'll wrap this around. And so we've got this shape here. The other thing we can do is start working a little bit on, we've got this fin structure that we're going to need to build something for. So we can start to extrude that out. You can see back here I've got too much going here. Here's where the back actually sits. Somewhere like this. And this is the danger of, remember me telling you that if you spend too much time in one view, I could get all these points laid out and they look very pretty and well organized and everything else like that, and the spacing's great, and I'm like, oh man, I've done some great stuff, right? Then we are going to go to the perspective view and check that out, and things might not be as perfect as we thought. So here we are. Now we've got to maybe pull this out, finesse this shape a little bit. Oops, and grab that here. Like that, and we definitely want to make sure these are snapped to the center. Temporarily hold down X, and it turns on that grid snap. Snap it to the center. Right there like that. And we'll push this over. I think that looks fairly good. Pull this up just a little bit like that. Okay, so I'll hit F8, hit delete, and let's just save this as the first iteration of this thing. So again, yeah, it's up to you, but I know the model isn't finished, but you can kind of organize things to save your file just to make sure the next time you or somebody else opens them, that'll be easy to find. So I could just group this entire head and call it something like this, and then go File, Save Scene As, and remember I said that we want to give this a underscore and a naming convention that allows us to just kind of add a number to it like that, and hit Save As, and then we always know how to get to the latest and greatest version of the file really quickly, and so would anybody else, and that way we're saving our work and we don't have to worry about losing our work. That's very important. Okay, so this will be the first part of roughing this thing out. I'm going to put the video in a time-lapse mode at some point and then keep working on this. So the only thing that I'm going to add to this, which you already know from previous videos, is shift right click, and then we're going to use the MultiCut tool, or we could go into the modeling toolkit over here and get to the MultiCut tool, and then start something for this fin up here. So we could drag something else like this, and you can see how I'm just adding a split for myself like that. I'll hit enter to complete the tool, and then now this line can stay exactly where it's at, this line that I just created, and we can hit F9 and put a move and start to move these points right down the center, and those can start to be our fin structure that we have like that. Okay, like I said, I'm going to put the video in a time-lapse mode, and I'm going to try to keep this as simple as possible and not introduce too many other tools or anything like that that we have not just discussed in this time period. That way you can just kind of see the thought process on how to get to maybe a final shape on this a bit more quickly. All right, there's a few takeaways that I want to point out from the time-lapse video. So one thing is just this grouping and organization. You probably saw at some point that I created a cylinder, and we just went to create polygon primitives, cylinder, and the options for that, we could change the radius, the height, and the divisions. I think if you're working kind of low res like this, like what we're doing, you don't want any more divisions than this 8 for the axis division. And so then I did this, and we went over to the channel box, and then we just added a division down the center of it, and then took the face right here, F11 on the top, and let me just select that, and then shift right click, and then you can merge face to the center, and that gives us the beginning of that tooth shape that we had. And then I just deleted the bottom of that. So you saw that I made duplicates of that. I named it in a certain way to where it was tooth underscore 001 was the first one, and every time I duplicate it, Maya automatically changes that from a 1 to a 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. Okay, and then it was just a matter of moving those into place and setting up the left side of that. And then I just made a group called teeth left. And the other thing I did was I was doing the freeze transformations on it, but I only wanted to freeze transformations on the scale because I wanted to still be able to go into these teeth, and if we wanted to rotate the object or move an object space, we don't want to get rid of this rotational information. And so the way that we can just freeze the scale is if we go to modify freeze transformations option box and just turn on scale and then say freeze transformations. So that's how you can just freeze just one particular thing. You can do translate, rotate, or scale. And then I've got a group. Once I have all those teeth in place, then I make an empty group just by selecting them and hitting Control G. And that gives me that group for the left side. And then I took the head, the left side of the head that I had going on. Let me hide this real quick so you can just see that. The left side of the head along with this teeth group, and then I took those two and then I grouped that under head underscore L. And that gives me a left side. So then that way I can duplicate that thing over. I'll delete it. So we've got this whole group here, and I put it in a group called head class. So it's just more organizational stuff. So I get that group here, and I can duplicate that. So edit, duplicate special option box, and then we've got an instance and given it a negative scale like that. And you probably saw in the video we got says black shading. Again, this is just some kind of draw bug. So hit Control H to hide it and Shift H to bring it back. And so again, if you don't see that problem, just know it's good practice to always keep remembering how to hide and show things. You're going to use that quite a bit. The other thing is you might have seen as creating this different geometry, I want to have all hard edges at this point. I feel that when I'm sculpting low res or poly modeling like this low res, it really helps me to understand what is the actual true form if I see all my edges as hard edges like that. So there's two different ways to get to it. Polygon menu subset, we can go to normals and say soften edge or harden edge. So if we do harden edge on the object, it hardens all the edges like that. We can do it that way, or we can shift right click and say soften edge, soften harden edge, and then we could do soften edge if we want, or harden edge. So you can see with the edges soft, which is what will end up going into game, doesn't really look so great for us when we're modeling and we're trying to figure out what's the actual form, because it's surrounding all this off with the shading within inside the program. So that's why we want to take that, shift right click, soften harden edge, and do that. And now I get a much better representation of what that volume actually is. The other thing to note is that I'm deleting history, so Alt Shift D, doing that a lot, making sure there's no history on my objects when it's not necessary. And the other thing is this poly count. So you're probably going to be given a polygon count for your figure, and I know I'm calling this the proxy model, and I can consider that. I usually do much higher res models than this, but there is modeling for like the mobile space and things like that, and maybe lower end PCs, older video game consoles. You would have to have a lower polygon count, so your polys that you're using actually becomes pretty darn important, and you don't want to waste any. So right now you can see if I select just this piece, I can see that the try count, how many triangles are actually in this thing, are 336, and that's the number that you want to be concerned with. And if I hold on shift and keep adding to this, you can see it's going to take into account those new objects that I'm selecting. So really I want to select everything. And so all my model that I've got currently for the head and the teeth are 736 triangles. So if you don't see that, you can go to display, heads up display, and then go to Polygon Count. So there's all kinds of useful information in here that you might want to use sometime later, but the one that you're going to be concerned about right now is probably going to be this poly count one right there. So the last thing that I kind of want to call out is that on this more low res version, normally I'm very concerned about how the eye looks on a character. And right now, since it's at this kind of low stage, I'm not as concerned about it. I just want to represent that kind of space. But normally I get pretty specific about the eye area. So normally I actually, let me hide this new piece that I did. It's just kind of getting in the way. Normally I start off with spheres for the eyes and put the eyes into place where I think that they need to go. Let me show that real quick so it's shading correctly. And then once the eyeballs, the spheres, are in place for the eyes, I usually take geometry and use the Create Polygon tool. So we go to Mesh Tools, Create Polygon tool. Up in here, I'm just not seeing it, Create Polygon tool right there. And I create these polygons that actually go around the eye and form the shape of the eye. And then I form these polys around that sphere, so I know that those actually work as an eyelid, and it could actually animate and close and everything. And then usually I grow out from the eyelid out for like the brow ridge, and then start the face and kind of grow the face out that way. Now there's, like I said, there's many different ways of modeling, and different people approach it different ways. It's just I'm so concerned with the eyes, and I feel that the eyes have such an important role in a character that that's usually what I focus in on as the very first thing. And for whatever reason, for me, I always feel like if I can nail the eyes, then I think I can get everything else to a pretty good state. But if I don't have the eyes nailed down, I always feel like no matter how good a character looks, if the eyes aren't done right, it just makes the entire character feel kind of dead. So that's why I kind of focus in on that area a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and hide these real quick and bring back the head. The other thing is to think about when you take a piece of geometry and you just have it intersect with like another piece of geometry. So sometimes if you're trying to save your polygon count, this might be the better route for you to go. It doesn't necessarily always look the best, but it's perfectly fine for you to take two objects and then just intersect them into each other like that. The other way that you would have to do that is you would have to cut around a piece of geometry like this. No, sorry, got the wrong tool. Hit F8. Let's do that MultiCut Tool. And you would have to cut along this. So let me go from here to like here. I'll just run this over here and hit enter. And there's some snapping going on, so I got to get a little bit closer here, like this. And I'll just hit enter. And you can see what I'm doing. I'm cutting around this thing to the point where I'll be able to delete that face away. and then I'm going to actually merge these two objects together. So now that that's created, like that, I'll go ahead and hit F11 to select my face, like this. I'll tap 4 so I can just make sure I'm selecting that, which everything's fine for that. And I might want to make this just a little bit bigger than what it needs to be. I'll hit backspace and delete that thing out. And you remember I deleted the bottom of these pieces of geometry down here, so there's no face down here. So I could take these verts at the very bottom and I could just move them, and I could snap them, point snap them to these verts here that we have here. So I'm going to turn on wireframe unshaded real quick. And if I hold down V, remember we can temporarily turn on vert snapping, and then I'll snap that like this. Snapping here. Let's work my way around the model like that. And we got this point here. Just a few more to go. Tap V and hold it like that. And I'll hit 5 for shaded mode. Okay, so now I've got these two objects and they actually can be welded together. So I'm going to delete the history of this, delete the history of this. I'm going to save my model just because I know from past sessions of Maya, sometimes when you combine objects, it can cause problems and stuff like that. And we've got this negative scale thing. We'll just get rid of it for now. So we can take this object, and we can actually combine them together and to form a brand new object. So we're going to go under polygons, and we're going to go to, let's see, mesh combine. So sorry, they've rearranged the different tools in here, so it still takes me a little while to know exactly where stuff is. So to combine, mesh, combine, like that. And you see how it just made a new object for us? So we can select it, delete the history to get rid of this polyunite stuff, like that. And then also just note that just because we merge these two objects together, it doesn't mean the vertices are actually welded together. We've looked at this at a different video. I'm not sure which video it was, but we'll just go back over this again. So if you go to display, polygons, custom polygon display, and you turn on your border edges, I'll turn off texture borders, and hit apply. Anywhere where there's an open edge, like this open edge here, you can see a nice thick line, and we can pump that up if we want a little bit higher, like this. And we can work our way around the model to sew this back up. So we'll select, I'll just do a marquee selection around this, and if I select too much back behind it or grab something else, you'll see the cursor won't be directly on top of this. It might look like, you know, somewhere off the center like that. So I got those two verts, shift right click and say merge vertices to center. And the first one won't look like any kind of change happens, but as we go here and grab those and hit G for our last command, or grab this, shift right click, merge vertices to center, or tap G for our last command, you can see how it's starting to sew that information up. And these are so close together, I might as well just grab all three of those points and do that, and then hold down X and just snap to the center of the grid. And I'll go here, hit G, here, hit G, and I think we're almost there. Hit G for this. Okay, so here's what we got now. We've got this thing kind of sewn up, but it still doesn't look that good. I mean, it looks about exactly the same as it looked before, but now you can see the model is actually all one piece model. So that process does take a little while. And if we select our edges here like this, maybe we can make it look a little bit better by raising some of that up to make it feel like there's some gum tissue kind of extending up to this thing. So the other thing is, you know, using that MultiCut tool and maybe finishing off some of these edges here just to make sure it's kind of splitting the way that we want. But see, here's where we get into, like, we're adding quite a bit more polys, and what I said was as we introduce more polygons, we really should be doing something with that geometry. So, you know, I could take this and run it down through here like that. And we're just moving that to build some slight curvature like that. I've got this extra point here, so I might as well pull it forward a little bit to build up some curvature. And I can pull that here. So again, I've added that geo, so you should really try to do something with it, unless you're just looking for a nice straight edge. And then I'll tap F8 to go into object mode, shift right click and say soften harden edge and harden my edges. And take a look at this. Let's go here. I think something happened here. I turned on lighting, sorry. So it's going to delete history. And now we can take a look at this thing. Let's duplicate everything on over. So we got this head left. I'm going to put it in that group and go edit, duplicate special, because we've got our instancing stuff set up. Hide this part and show it. And let's hide the teeth. Show the teeth. There we go. And we'll turn off wireframe on shaded. So here's the result. So you can see here this is intersecting. This doesn't look so great just because the way it's intersecting right now. It's kind of low res and everything. But you can see this transition is a bit nicer on this thing, but it does chew up a bit more polys to just get that little effect. Now, in the case of a character, you know, like I said, I care about the eyes and the mouth and the head. So if I was going to spend any extra polys in certain areas, I would make the head look really nice and maybe the hands nice high res too, so they feel nice and rounded. That's where I usually try to spend my budget to make things look a little bit better. And then we can go to normals and soften edge. And now you could see, you know, if we took the teeth and soften all the edges on the teeth. So go to normal, soften edge. And I might have to do that one at a time. It might not like it if I do it. Yep. Doesn't like it if I do the whole group all one time. So here's our teeth. I'm going to delete history. So this is be something more like what it looks like as it goes into game. So as we get further away from this, you can see how it shades a little bit different, and how we might be able to get a little bit more detail by actually cutting those pieces in. It's just a matter of, you know, how many polys do you want to spend for that. And if you don't ever see like the back side of things, it's possible that you could maybe take these verts right in here like this, and then merge those to the center like that, just because nobody's really going to see that. So if you don't see the information, it's not really necessary to have it. So you can see something like that, because really you're only worried about this, maybe more what the front of this thing kind of looks like on it, like that. So I'm going to select that again, and I'll harden all the edges, shift, soften edge, harden edge. I'll go to harden edge like that, and I'll do the same thing for the teeth. I'll just hit the teeth like that and hit G, and we'll delete history on this, tap 6, and get everything kind of nice and shored up. The other thing is I was turning on this ambient screen space, ambient occlusion, and anti-aliasing, and that just makes the quality kind of look a little bit better. And if you turn on this ambient occlusion and it's drawing like this black nastiness like this, that means your normals need to be reversed. So if I take this thing, go to normals, reverse, and your model looks something like that, that means your normals are facing inward and they need to face outward. So you just go normals, reverse, like that. And I'll do history. Take a look at the quad views, and everything's kind of nice and is place. Save this as the latest iteration, And I'll do File, Save Scene As. I've already given it a number, so I'll just save over that one like that, and we should be ready to go. So again, that's just box modeling the head, and we'll start looking at how we can box model some of these other shapes, but this is probably going to be one of the more complex pieces and sections for this character. So just note that this is why this one's probably going to take a little bit longer than all the rest of them.